Coming up next on Hands on Windows, we're going to take another look at the Microsoft Work or School account. It's an awkward name for a pretty interesting account type.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
The following show is brought to you through the generosity of people like you. Thanks.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Hands on Windows. I'm Paul Thurrott, and this week we're going to take another look at the Microsoft Work or School account. We did an episode on this some time ago. A few things have changed since then, both with the account itself and in Windows 11. So I thought this might be a good time to re-examine this, right? So for a quick recap, Microsoft Work or School accounts, which is a terrible name, are Microsoft account-like online accounts that are used by businesses, schools, governments, and other organizations, right? This is considered a managed account. Remember, we had the discussion about different types of accounts and accounts of accounts and so forth. And what that means is that there is some organization that will maintain some level of control over your account and the configuration when you sign in Windows 11. This is typically done by an IT department and is controlled by policy. From your perspective as the user, that means that there will be some form of limitations, additional security controls, et cetera, that consumers don't typically see when they sign in with a Microsoft account. And that management occurs through something called Active Directory. If you're in an old school organization that has on-premises infrastructure still, more likely you'll be using what's now called Entra ID, which used to be called Azure Active Directory, or AAD. That's basically an identity service in the cloud that Microsoft has. And some people still think about this type of account as a Microsoft 365 account or even a Microsoft 365 commercial account. And it is true that if you have a Microsoft 365 commercial account, you pretty much will have a Microsoft Work or School account, but you don't have to, right? And so they're not actually the same thing, but for our purposes, that doesn't matter too much. One of the interesting aspects to this account type is that if you want to do this as an individual, you don't have to be part of an organization. You can get started with your own Microsoft 365 commercial account for as little as $6 per month. That gives you 1 terabyte of storage and OneDrive for Business. It gives you that Entra ID management that you can do on your own as an organization of one if you'd like. You can have a custom domain, which is nice because you can't do that anymore with Microsoft accounts, which used to be a capability. And when you sign into Windows 11, which is part of the point of this show, you get a much cleaner default install. You don't get a lot of the crapware that Microsoft puts on there. So that's pretty good. The bad news is that you need to have Windows 11 Pro or higher. You can't do this with Windows 11 Home if you want to sign in with that account, that is. It's still going to track you. You know, you can't turn off the optional, the required tracking that's built into Windows 11. You would have to have Windows 11 Enterprise to do that. That requires a business account, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not perfect, but it is a little bit better in some ways than using an MSA or a Microsoft account. And then as far as using this account in Windows, there's 3 or 4 different ways. You can sign in directly to the computer, like you do today with a Microsoft account or a local account. You can already have a Microsoft account on the computer and then connect your Work or School account to it so that you can access things like email, calendar, apps, OneDrive-based content, et cetera, on your home computer. You can have 2 sign-ins, right? 2 or more. One is a Microsoft account. One is your Work or School account. So you can kind of boot into Windows in either environment and just kind of choose. And then there's a kind of an option I don't really want to talk about too much because you can turn any account type. You could have a Gmail account, a Yahoo account, whatever, into a Microsoft account. So you could do that with the Work or School account. Don't do that, especially if the Work or School account is controlled by your employer or your school, because you lose that account and that would make you lose access to anything you might have in that Microsoft account, right? So you want to be careful about that, but we're not going to talk about that part of it today. So that's a kind of a quick recap of what this thing is. So let's look at some of the ways you might use this. The first thing is that if you want to, or maybe your work has given you a computer or loaned you a computer because you're an employee, it arrives in the mail or they bring it to you. You'll step through that out-of-box experience, which we've talked about a lot. And the big difference is on this phase of that wizard, You're asked if you want to set up for personal use or set up for work or school. Most people, individuals, consumers will choose the top option, but if you're doing this for a work or school account, obviously you're going to choose the second option. And you go through whatever authentication you have to go through, username, password, maybe a 2FA, whatever it might be, whatever they require. And it will basically be the same from there. So I'll get rid of that. That's that. The other thing, this computer here that I'm using is just a normal Windows 11 install. It's a Windows 11 Pro computer. I signed in with my Microsoft account. You can also just kind of use aspects of your work or school account inside of Windows while you're signing in with a Microsoft account. That's all controlled through the accounts interface here in the settings app. There's a couple of different places you can go to make this happen. You can see there's an access work or school area, so you can connect your account here. I could go in here. I have an organization of one, like I said, so I can do this kind of a thing where I say, well, I want to connect my account to this computer, to this sign-in. This allows me to access remotely various aspects of that account, even though I'm using a Microsoft account, right? Now, this is going to require me to use whatever security we have on this account. I don't know that I have, this is kind of a newly set up computer, so I'm just going to type in the password, which I wouldn't normally need to do, but and I can't do it correctly because the microphone's in my face, but let's see. And it will then, I'm using an authenticator app. That's one of the typical ways you could secure an account with two-step verification. So it's asking me to type in the code, which I'm doing on the phone, securely authenticating with biometrics, and this will register the device. And what that means here is now they're applying policy down to the device, whatever they might have. And they, in this case, is me, so there's not really a lot going on, but now you can see that this thing is connected, right? It's not a sign-in, right? If I go down to here, I don't have a sign-in for that. But what it means is that I can access some of the resources from this organization. If I go into accounts again, and then there's an area called email and accounts, you can see that it's been added here, actually, it's not added for email. I'm sorry. It's added for apps. And so what that means is I can sign into apps using this account, and it will pass through that authentication. I can also add it here if I want to access my email calendar and contacts, and probably to-do and other items like that, through the new Outlook app now, right? It used to be mail and calendar and people. Now we've got this new app, but still same central interface. You would use this misnamed Office 365 choice to do that. I might as well just do it. We're here. Same thing. Type in the account information. It's probably going to ask me to verify myself, I would imagine, although maybe not. Everything happens slowly. Okay, yeah, work or school account. And I will continue. Yeah, okay. Don't need the app. Okay, I've already authenticated. So now I've got this account set up everywhere. I can kind of set it up, right? Well, actually not everywhere. There's one more place. And that other place is OneDrive, right? And so if we go into OneDrive settings, right now, OneDrive is set up for my personal account, but I can add an account. And I'm not going to do this part of it because I don't want the two OneDrives in here, but I can type in my credentials for the work or school account like I did earlier, sign in, and now I'll have two OneDrives. And so when I go into, say, File Explorer, for example, which is on the other monitor, instead of just having Paul Personal, I would also have the one associated with a work account. For people who do use folder backup, you can only have that associated with one of the two accounts. So if you want to use that with the second one you added, you have to disable it on the first, and then you can enable it on the second. You'll have two OneDrive icons down here in the system tray area. One will be blue for personal and gray. I'm sorry, I reversed that. In the tray, it will be gray for personal and blue for the commercial account. Okay. All right. So that's how you kind of configure that. And this is, in other words, this is kind of a bring your own device scenario, right? This is my computer. I'm accessing corporate resources, or at least in this case, I'm just configuring it for that. One simple way to see how you might use that is if you run something like the Microsoft Store app. I could sign out of this app and then sign in, but now I could choose a different account. And when I do that, I could then access my corporate apps store that they might have with their own apps and all that kind of thing. So you could do that. I'm not going to do that here, but again, I could access my OneDrive and SharePoint-based files through the OneDrive app, et cetera. I can get my corporate email and calendar and contacts, et cetera, through the OneDrive. Sorry, the Outlook app. So you can do all this stuff, and it's my computer. And later, if I leave the job or leave the school, or they just shut me down, whatever it might be, I can just go in here and remove those things, right? So I can go into Access Worker. This would be the obvious place to start, and just disconnect it, right? And then that will sever that connection. It won't sever the secondary ones I did, but I'll just get rid of those later. You kind of get the idea. All right, so that's the BYOD version, right? You're bringing your own computer to the equation. Maybe you're working from home. You want to remotely access your corporate resources and so forth. So you can do that, right? You can also add your work or school account as a separate sign-in. And the process for that is painfully similar to what I just did. You actually go into settings. You have to be careful about which of these you want because they're very similar. Accounts, again, access work or school, connect, again. And, again, you type in the email address here. But this time you're going to join this device to one of these two things, depending on which your organization uses. They'll tell you which to connect to. In my case, I know it's Entra ID. I have to go through this whole sign-in process. I'm not going to do that. But what this will do is provide you with a second sign-on the computer so that when you come down here, you could choose that from the list. Also, if I were to lock this or sign out, you would see it on the lock screen, right? So that you could get into it that way. So those are the kinds of ways that you can do this. But the thing I really want to show you is why you might want to do this as an individual, right? This might be forced on you because you have to use it for work or school, but you might actually want to go in this direction, right? It's a Microsoft account-like experience, but there's a management interface you can access. There's an account management interface you can access just for the individual account. And then there are some big differences in the way that Windows 11 works. So to see that, I'm actually going to switch computers because it would be too tedious with the screen recording software to kind of switch between accounts on the same computer. And what I have here is an account that I set up earlier today, a sign-in account on this other computer with that account that you saw me set up as kind of a secondary connected account on the main PC that I'm using, right? This is the paul@paulthurrott.com pretend corporation account, right? So from a high level, this thing looks almost identical to a normal Windows 11 install. The differences are kind of minor, but important in many ways. So for example, like I said, you don't get any of the crapware or the bundleware stuff that Microsoft puts into Windows by default. Instead of 2 pages of pinned icons and so forth, you only have a couple of icons here. Not a lot going on. So the minimalist part of me, really, that's appealing to me. You don't have to uninstall or remove things from the start menu. When you go into the all apps list, it's a lot shorter. I don't remember for sure, but this is an HP computer, and you can see here by default you only get the 1 HP utility. I want to say this thing has 8 to 11 HP utilities by default if you sign up with a Microsoft account. So you get kind of a streamlined experience, which I think is a big deal. You don't get access to search highlights. So when I click on search here, you get a kind of a minimalist experience. But the point here isn't that it's kind of smaller or lighter or whatever. It's that they don't have all of that Bing and MSN tie-in kind of adware stuff going on, right? This is just for work. And if you look at the screen here, it's actually kind of interesting. The search bar is over here on the side. It's not on the top for whatever reason, but you're not just searching your computer and or the web, you're searching your organization as well. So this isn't going to work out too well for me because I don't have too much going on, but if it's just me. But if I search for, say, Apple, right, I do have my work archives in this account in OneDrive, right? And so it will eventually come up with whatever articles and folders with the name Apple in it that I've written over the years, over literally 30 years, will come up in here, and I can access that from here. By default, it's actually the default setting is to go to work. I could also search for people. I don't want to do that. It's only me, and there's probably personal information in there, but you can do that kind of thing. It looks at the documents you've created to see if you use a lot of different acronyms. It will give you that kind of thing. In a real organization, this would be a really interesting way to find people, to find resources, to find other things related to whatever project you might be working on. So that's kind of cool. Microsoft Edge runs in the Edge for Business mode by default, of course. And this isn't necessarily it's sort of an Edge feature. I mean, it would probably work from other browsers as well. But when you go, because of the way this works with the homepage, it says search Paul Thurrott in the web. Paul Thurrott is not me, Paul Thurrott. It's that pretend organization that for some reason it believes is called Paul Thurrott. So in other words, what you're really doing is searching Bing the same way that we did in search integrated into Windows. So if I typed in the same thing I did before, which was just Apple, I would have to go to the Work tab because the default, of course, is just the normal Bing search. But you'll see the exact same results that came up in that search box. It's kind of interesting, right? So again, a really neat way to search for data of all kinds about people, files, obviously, messages through Teams, images, whatever it might be in your organization. You can do that right from the web browser too, which is pretty cool. The File Explorer experience is also a little different. In some ways, it's simpler. You don't get the, I'm trying to minimize that. You don't get the quick access icons there on the top for whatever reason. That's something your organization can actually configure. I'm not much of an administrator. I haven't been able to figure out how to turn that on. It's off by default. The big difference, though, is that this recommended section is here. You will not see that in the consumer versions of Windows 11. There's nothing there because I'm an organization of one and I don't actively work in this account all day. But if I did, what this would show is information related to what Microsoft calls insights or recommended files. I'm working on a project with some team and there are other people, and maybe Bob has updated a Word document. That thing would show up there and it would allow me to access it without having to dive into the file system. So it's actually really handy in a workplace. As an individual, not a big deal. I talked about OneDrive for Business, the blue icon, et cetera. That's not super exciting, but again, this is my OneDrive for Business files, file structure, cloud storage file structure, and I talked about that work archive, and you can see what that is here. So you can see. Dating back many years, I've got whatever archive and whatever number of files are in there. So that's accessible just as it would be for a consumer. And then the other thing to kind of know about is that there is an account management interface. Actually, there are two interfaces we could probably talk about. If you're familiar with Microsoft accounts, you know that you go on the web to account.microsoft.com, right, to get to the Microsoft account website. For this thing, it's actually myaccount.microsoft.com. And what it brings you to is the similar website for your user account in this organization, right? So it's structured a little bit differently. It's basically the same thing. If you wanted to go in and mess around with the security settings, maybe add like an authenticator app for two-factor authentication or passkeys or security keys and so forth, which are things we will be talking about soon. You would do that here. This is just for your account, your user account. But you also, because you're an administrator in my case, right, or you would be if you did this yourself, you also get access to the Microsoft 365 admin interface, which is complex, frankly. I had to go in here to enable, I think it was security key access. That took me about 45 minutes. I'm not good at this. Some of this stuff is hidden. You might have some idea about where you think something is, but actually they're not showing you everything. So you kind of have to turn this on. Then you can see the full list of capabilities. So if you want to be an organization of one, like I am, you'll have full access as an admin to make any changes you want. One of the default lockdown elements to this account type, for example, is that when you have a PIN for Windows 11, when you sign in for a Microsoft account, the minimum length of that is 4 characters, which is super easy, 1, 2, 3, 4. For this account, it's 6 characters. And so every time I type in a PIN on this account, I always do it wrong the first time, hit enter, and then, it's 6 characters. And that's a feature. I could configure that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not very good at this, but that's a capability. Okay, so that's the work or school account type. Do you want this as an individual? You might. I mean, if you're watching this podcast, you're probably technical enough to be interested in it. And if you're in the Microsoft world, I mean, this is kind of a step up from the Microsoft account. You can use this account as a Microsoft account as well, by the way. And in this case, because you control it, that's not the horrible idea that it would be if it was your workplace or school. The other thing to note about this is that I showed you earlier that you could connect your work or school account to a Microsoft account sign in Windows 11 to get access to those resources. You could do the reverse as well. So if you sign in with a work or school account, you could connect your Microsoft account to that. So you could have kind of a work-focused computer, but the store would be signed into your Microsoft account instead of your work or school account, because that's maybe you would already purchased apps or content there or whatever, and you want to gain access to that. You could go in that kind of reverse direction as well. To kind of figure out if this is of interest to you, though, I think what you should probably do is do a search on Google or Bing or whatever for Microsoft 365 commercial accounts. You'll see that they have a variety of account types like everyone else does. Like I said, it starts at $6 and up per month. At that level, you only getting access to the Office web apps. If you pay it's about $12 a month. You gain access to the desktop apps like you do in Microsoft 365 Family or Personal on the consumer side. So that's that's the price for a year. That's not the price if you just pay month to month. So it is more expensive, and it's per user per month. It's not per month. You don't get 3 users or 5 users or whatever it might be. It's per user. So it's not good for groups of people, unless you're actually starting a business, obviously. And again, you get that custom domain capability, which is pretty cool. So this is kind of at this level, at the $6 to $12 level, this is roughly equivalent to what you see on the consumer side with Microsoft 365 and probably what you see, say, from like a Google Workspace type account. But you can use it to sign into Windows 11. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. We will be back every Thursday with a new episode. You can find out more about this podcast at twit.tv/HOW. And I wanted to thank everybody for watching and subscribing. Especially I wanted to thank Club Twit members for keeping this whole thing going. We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.